for the live stream. Is it all right now?
Yeah.
All right. So
make sure you mic close to me.
so yeah, a little bit of an introduction. Is it on?
Closer. Make sure.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There we go.
Is this better? No. Okay. So a little bit of an introduction of myself. So yeah, Mario. Work as a principal security consultant with IOActive, and well, as many of you guys, I'm probably a technology enthusiast. And yeah, I've been on the amateur astronomy hobby for longer than 20 years. And well, I mostly don't like visual observation, but over the last year, maybe year and a half, nearly 2 years, I moved on to astrophotography, which is kind of like a new hobby. And it's kind of like what we're going to talk about today, which is over here. So this is not your typical hack SOHO talk. We're not really going to talk about any infosec whatsoever. So if you don't like it, it's okay. It's more of an introduction to the amateur astronomy world. Some of you actually might get attracted by this because it's like a little bit of a mix between technology and science. So if you're into those things, maybe you like this. And yeah, we're going to discuss is basically the evolution of technology within the amateur astronomy world, like how things have evolved over the last maybe 20 or 30 years, where like, like maybe 30 years ago, there was barely any technology aside from like, the equipment was mostly like optical. And these days, there's a lot of new stuff that's coming out. And mainly that's because like the technology has evolved a lot in the terms of like things like cameras and so on. So amateur astronomers are putting all those things into practice to get like better pictures, and well, basically the whole astronomy hobby has evolved a lot, and that's what we're gonna talk about. Right? So yeah, I think it goes in line a little bit with the hacking spirit in terms of like. Well, in the end of the day, it's a hobby, and people are trying to put things together. Like, what will happen if I get this camera and I hack it and I change the firmware or whatever, and then maybe I can use that for my hobby, like in this case, astronomy. So we're gonna cover a little bit of that too. So yeah, basically hacks made by the community and so on. So I was asked to give a talk here at Hack SOHO. And then, well, basically, I didn't really have any of the stuff to present at this moment. And then I was like, maybe I can give a talk about astronomy. And yeah, I googled astronomy and hacking, and I came across this book, and I was like, okay, maybe I can actually do it. So that's a little bit of the story of how this talk came around. Anyway. So before we get started, we're gonna do an introduction, a little bit of an introduction to. What's the amateur astronomy? So first of all, it's a hobby, and well, many of the amateur astronomers, they engage into different activities. Like some of them they belong to a club, some others they just like to observe on their own. And well, there's people like who focus on very different things. Like some people they might focus on like the moon. Some other people they focus on taking photographs of the sun, whatever. Some people they engage into, I don't know, like doing some citizen science. That's what they call it, like monitoring like variable stars, double stars, whatever, the sunspots. There's a little bit of everything. So even if you're an amateur astronomer, like you probably are into one of those things. Like there's a little bit of everything. It's like IT, pretty much. Like some people are into hacking web apps, whatever. Some other people are into different things. So within the amateur astronomy world, there's a lot of stuff to do. So well, that's only an introduction of what an amateur astronomer is, like things that an amateur astronomer might need. Well, you can obviously do a lot of stuff just with your naked eye if you go out. Some people actually try to, they actually like to use, for instance, binoculars. Actually, like most comets, they actually handle using binoculars instead of telescopes. You might need a jacket as well if you're gonna spend like a long night out there. The king of the crown will probably the telescope, like mostly every amateur astronomer will have a telescope. And then you're obviously gonna need a charts and things like that. And yeah, if you're gonna spend a long night, probably you need beer or coffee or something like that as well. So let's get started, and I'm gonna give you a brief introduction to the equipment. So things that usually form part of the equipment of an amateur astronomer. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, and the evolution of that equipment. Okay, so there's different types of telescopes. There's 3 different types of telescopes, but within those 3 types, there are more subtypes anyway. But the first one would be the refractor, which is only made of lenses, right? That was the first telescope that was invented in the 17th century. And well, it's just like I said, it's just made of lenses. Okay. Those telescopes, they tend to be smaller than the other ones because the lenses are more expensive to produce, basically. Then after that telescope, like the next type we got is the reflector, which is made of mirrors. So you get a mirror here. This is a parabolic mirror that basically focuses all the light beam into this another mirror, which is it's just a flat mirror. And then here's where the eyepiece goes. So pretty much all the telescopes, they will have like well, the optical system, and then you use eyepieces which you connect to the telescope to observe. Those eyepieces, we're gonna see them later. They're also made of lenses. Okay, so yeah, we have those 2 main types: the refractor, the reflector, and then we have the compound telescope, which is also called Catadioptric Telescope. And that one is made out of lenses and mirrors. So you have both things. So it's one of those telescopes is good for a different thing. Like for instance, refractors they usually use for planetary astronomy, like for instance to watch the moon or the planets, etc. The reflectors is usually used for photography of deep sky objects and stuff like that. And the compound one, it will give you like more magnification. So it's usually used to photograph like objects that seem smaller, you know, that basically they look small in the sky, pretty much. Okay, so now let's have a look at telescopes from different from like long time ago. Well, long time ago, I'm talking about like 30, 40 years ago. So we have the classic refractor from the 60s, 70s, which looks like that one actually. And believe it or not, people used to say that those old refractors they actually work better than the newer ones because they were made of better materials. If you buy one of those, this will be like a 60 millimeter or 70 millimeter refractor. If you buy one of those today, it's gonna be probably like a really entry level telescope, and they're made of cheap materials like and they're not worth a lot of money. So in terms of evolution, I wouldn't say that. I mean, probably like the optics, they have like if you get a really good refractor these days, the lenses are gonna have like better coating, and the optics are gonna be better. But I don't think there's been like a huge evolution from the old telescopes to the newer ones in terms of like lenses, mirrors, etc. Okay, so if you look at the telescope actually from this is the 80s, the 85. Actually, at that time, the Halley comet was going to come by. So this is a reflector telescope, and yeah, if you compare that to a reflector telescope from today, it's pretty much the same thing in terms even of like the mount, the optics, everything. It might actually even be better, you know. So yeah. Some more types of telescopes. This is the Catadioptric Telescope. This is one from the 80s, and actually I have like the same version, but like well made in like the 2000s. And if you look at it, it's actually pretty much like the same thing they're selling today. Like I said, maybe they have evolved a little bit in terms of like the coating that the optics has and everything, but the way the optical tube assembly works is pretty much like the exact same thing. And in terms of like the optics, maybe they have evolved a little bit, but like not a lot. If you look through one of those and through one of the older ones and one made like I don't know a few years back, you might be able to tell the difference, but like it's not gonna be like really significant. Okay. This is a Ritchie Chrétien astrograph, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right actually. This is actually a recent telescope. Like this. I mean, I think this type of telescope is a compound telescope or a catadioptric as well. I think it was invented on the 20s or something like that. And this is actually the same type of telescope that the Hubble Space Telescope is. You know, what I wanted to say about this one is that if you look like maybe 20 years back or 30 years back, no astronomer, no amateur astronomer would have a telescope like this. But these days, like they're starting to get them, you know. So because like maybe a telescope like this would be like 6,000 or 7,000 euros or something like that. Well, it can go from that up to maybe 100K or something. But this telescope has been specifically designed to do imaging. Okay, so it's just to take pictures of the sky. And the telescopes that they were using maybe 30 years ago, they were just general purpose telescopes, and when they were taking pictures with them, they would just attach a camera and they would take the pictures and everything, but they hadn't been specifically designed to take pictures. And this is not the case here. Like that particular telescope is called an astrograph, and it was specifically designed to take pictures. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is like, even though most telescopes haven't really evolved in the amateur astronomy world, like we've seen now amateur people that have really specialized equipment, and this is one of those cases. Okay. Okay. Next thing, eyepieces. So, like I told you before, when you're using a telescope, basically you have like the optical assembly tube, and then you have the eyepieces. Those eyepieces, they can go into any type of telescope, and they're made of lenses. There's different types of them, and they will give you like different magnification, different field of view, etc. But well, you can see here in the picture there's different types of them. I don't think in terms of evolution, like these eyepieces have evolved a lot. It's the same thing as with the optics of the telescopes, right? And this will be only for visual observation, obviously. Like if you're going to do imaging, you don't really need an eyepiece. Okay. So here I have another slide. You can see like this. There's not only well, those types of eyepieces that were on the previous slide. They were the most popular, but there's like like 25 or 30 of them, different ones. Okay. More things that an amateur astronomer use in conjunction with the telescope. One of them will be filters. Okay. So for instance, if you wanna observe the sun, you're not gonna look straight with your telescope because you get blind, right? So there's different type of filters, and those allow you to basically look at the sunspots and things like that. Or if you haven't really, there's like filters that in conjunction with some other equipment, you can actually take pictures of some of the, I think they call them the prominences or whatever, like so the flames coming out of the sun and stuff like that. Okay. So yeah, if you want to watch the sun or if you want to observe the sun, you're gonna have to get one of those filters. And again, in terms of evolution, I don't think there's been a significant evolution between the filters that they were using 30 years ago and the filters that we use today. Another type of filter is a filter to watch the moon, because like when you're looking through a powerful telescope, like the moon actually might be so bright that it wouldn't get blind, but it will be annoying. Okay, so some astronomers use filters to watch the moon. Again, like no difference between moon filters probably today and the ones from yesterday. Color filters. So those are usually used to tell the difference between some details. For instance, like if you're observing a planet with like a yellow filter, you might be able to watch the bands in Jupiter, for instance. Like, I mean, you might be able to tell like you'll get like better contrast. So that's one of the uses. The other one is like some people that use monochrome cameras. They might use those filters to produce RGB pictures. So they'll have to take one picture with each one of which is one of the filters, and then like they will forge a picture basically. Okay, so again, like in terms of evolution, I don't think there's been a significant change between those filters today and before. This light pollution filters. Well, light pollution wasn't probably like a huge problem like maybe 30 years back, but it is today. So I would say like maybe yeah, light pollution filters have become a little bit more specialized. So what that would do is actually it would block like the specific wavelengths from light from like the street lamps, because most of the street lamps they will be like sodium based, for instance, or they will be like from mercury vapor or whatever. So what those filters do is they block all those wavelengths, and they only let the rest of the visible light pass through them. So those are really handy if you're observing within the city, whatever. You can use them either for visual observation or for photography as well. Okay. So yeah, I guess like maybe there's been like kind of like an evolution of that. Narrowband filters. We're gonna cover this later when we're gonna talk about imaging in more deep into it. Okay. But basically, this would only, instead of like, for instance, like the light pollution filter would only block those wavelengths that belong to mercury vapor, whatever. This would block everything but the wavelength from hydrogen to oxygen, whatever, sulfur to. And those wavelengths are the wavelengths that are interesting because like when you look in, for instance, like at the nebula, you're gonna get those wavelengths in, okay? Because like it's like the light that's been emitted by those nebulas, it comes from hydrogen too, or it comes from oxygen, whatever. These are really interesting because they let you do things, well, they let you block everything, and they let you, we're gonna see later, they will let you even like take really good photographs within a city. Because you're gonna block all the light but that, okay? We're gonna see that in more detail later. Okay, mounts. So when you have a telescope, you have to put it on a mount, right? There's different types of mounts. Basically, some of them are altitude azimuth, which means like you can go up and down and left and right. The other one that we have in the middle, even though it says like it's a Dobsonian mount, it's another type of azimuth altitude mount. The only difference is that it's not mounted on a pole or anything. It's just like it's a piece of wood basically, and it moves around. And then the other one is the equatorial mount. That one is interesting because if you think if you take a picture of like a long exposure picture of the sky, like I don't know, like an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, well, more than 3 hours or 4 hours, you're gonna get. I mean, and you point to the polar star, you're gonna get something like this, right? You're gonna get the star trails. So if you're gonna photograph an object in the sky, you're gonna have to follow it somehow, because you're gonna have to do long exposure pictures, right? So you need a mount that will be able to follow the object. So that's what you get here with the equatorial mount. The polar axis here is pointing to the North Celestial Pole, the NCP, and that way then you move into two axes. One of them is called right extension, and the other one is called declination. And you can point anywhere in the sky, and then if you just like follow the star on the right extension axis, it will follow the movement. So I mean, you can do that manually, but then like these days telescopes and everything, and they will do it on their own, and then you can take pictures. Okay, so you wouldn't get this. All right. So in terms of evolution, again, like those equatorial mounts have been there for yonks. So no real evolution, I guess. Now we're getting more into the technology side, which you might appreciate. So computer-driven scopes and go-to systems. So if you look at equipment from the 80s, this was a, I don't know actually what this does, but I guess it's controlling the telescope. So it's going to control the angles of the telescope. And that was only in 85, which is like 30 years back. And it looks like it must have been big enough probably. So yeah, that would be like the system that controls the engines. So if you're taking a photograph, it's going to control how the engine moves and the balance and everything. And that was like 30 years back. So compared to, well, the next one that we're gonna say is from the 90s, and it's like the exact same thing, but for an SCD telescope. Okay, so as well as like doing the engine movement. This one is doing permanent error correction, which is an issue that every equatorial mount has. Just like the way the gears work within an equatorial mount, they have like there's a problem with the gears themselves that cannot be solved, and there's a periodic error. So well, it has like a technology blah blah that tries to correct the problem. Okay. But anyway, like this would be doing like pretty much the same thing that the other one was doing like maybe 30 years back. But look at the difference. Like it's just a handheld device connected to the models. From there, we went to the go-to systems. This is from '95. So the go-to systems, what it would do is, in this case, the telescope is mounted on a azimuth altitude axis. Well, azimuth altitude mount, and it has those two axes. And what it would do is like when you power the telescope on, it would tell you like, okay, where is like this star, like Vega, for instance, like, and then you point the telescope to Vega. Okay. Well, you have to input like your location, you have to input like the time that it is, and a number of parameters. Okay. So the telescope knows where it is. And then after you do that, you point to one star and then another star, and then the telescope models the whole sky. And then you can tell him like, I want to see this object, and then it will just go by itself and it will point to it. So those go-to systems were already available in '95. And well, it says there that it has like, I don't know, a catalog of like 12,000 objects, this many galaxies, and it can also predict what the planets of the solar system are going to be. So it has that kind of like firmware that's built in, okay? And it can also like, if you tell it like, okay, point to the moon, whatever, like it will go to the moon. Okay. So these go-to systems actually like they were early as I mean they were available as from '95. So it's been out there for a while. Okay. This is the same thing but from today. So again, like maybe the catalog or maybe they have improved the programs a little bit. But there's no real difference from the 90s to, I mean, for the last 15, 20 years. There hasn't been like a lot of improvement on that, I guess. Yeah, this is the same one, but from, so there's two big brands within the SCD telescopes, the Catadioptric, one of them is Mi-8, and the other one is Celestron, and they both have their own systems, whatever. So this one is the other one. Okay. Cameras. So yeah, as amateur astronomers use different types of cameras. Some of them are cameras that are really available off the shelf, like things like a single lens camera. I mean, a single lens reflex camera, which are the older ones with film. DSLRs, which are the digital version of the cameras with film. And then they have like astrophotography specific cameras, things like CCDs and CMOS, which would be like, well, the CMOS, this relates to the technology of the chip, right? So actually, DSLR cameras, as far as I know, most of them are based also on CMOS chips, and CCD stands for coupled device, whatever. So it's a different technology. I think CCDs used to be better. Then these days, CMOS are getting really good, and they're like catching up with them. I mean, with the CCDs. And you can have both versions either in mono or in color. We'll talk a little bit more about why people are using monochromatic cameras later on anyway. Then you have video cameras, because like some people use video cameras for planetary imaging. Some people are using even like mirrorless cameras, like anything really. Even like some people are using smartphones and things like that these days. Okay. So, in terms of evolution, like, well, this is an ad from Sky Telescope. I know it's a little bit blurry, but it basically it's an ad about a camera like an SLR. So this will be like film based, and well, they're selling this camera for $200, and they're saying that it's perfect for astrophotography. Okay. If you look at that camera, this is a better picture of the same camera. So yeah, it's basically a film-based camera. Okay, so this is what people used to use like 30 years back.
It's a Russian one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Russian one. They call it the machine or something apparently. I mean, that's the nickname for that camera. So yeah, like if you think of it, like when people were taking pictures of the sky like 30 years back with this type of cameras, they would have to go long exposure, right? So they would put like long exposure, they would put the camera there, and they would have to do everything in a single shot. And they wouldn't really even have an idea of like, is the picture going well? Am I pointing to the right object? Because you don't know that till you develop the film and things like that. So that's a little bit of what we're gonna talk about now. So yeah, that was like from, I think the ad was from the 91, so that's like not that long ago. Well, long enough, but not that long. Then, right after that, like the first Ccd cameras were coming out, and that's when, I mean, probably some of you remember when like digital cameras came out. So mostly at the same time, the Ccd cameras were coming out, and the first ones, from what I know, because I've never used one of those, basically they had a matrix of like this number of pixels by this number of pixels, and you will take a picture of the sky, and then you will you do some post processing if you wanted after that in your computer or whatever. Okay, but they were very limited in what, like the sensor was only like I mean they were the first sensors, so the size of the sensors was really small. So if you wanted to take a picture, for instance, of like a big object, what people would usually do is they would take lots of pictures, like, and they would then compound like a mosaic, you know, with all the different pictures, trying to put the object together. That's if you want to go, if you want to take a picture of like a big enough object, which this also happens today. But like, I mean, you have to think in terms of like the size of the sensor back then. It was like way smaller. Okay. All right. Some more cameras. This is another camera. This is just like for reference anyway. It's just to show you like a little bit of the evolution. You know, these are SB. This is another CCD camera. I think this one is from. This is the same one that I think I showed in the ad before. Yeah, this is the SB, and this is the. Well, here they only show in the picture that it's again very blurry. And this is from a magazine that was published in black and white anyway. This is the actual camera attached to a scope. And well, you can see a little bit like the electronics, and basically you connect this to the eyepiece of the telescope, and that's the way that the pictures were taken. Okay, so from there we're going to 95, and the cameras are evolving a little bit more. So basically the chips are getting bigger, more powerful, maybe more sensitive, whatever. So this is from 95, and this is the Pictor series camera. This is another advertisement from Ccd Telescope. So yeah. Now, people also use, like these days, they also use like regular Dslr cameras. So they can attach them to the telescope and they will take pictures with that, no problem. But these days we have also like, well, the same thing as before, but way more evolved dedicated cameras. So here we have an ATIC. This one is for video astronomy, so this will be usually used for things like to take pictures of planets. So what they do is they record a video, and then that way they take like loads of pictures of the same planet. I mean, each frame in the video is going to be a different picture, right? And because when you're doing like planetary astronomy, you don't really need to do long exposure pictures. So that's why the video works, okay? And then they select the best frames and they stack them together, which is another technique that I'm going to show you now. Now, this is the SOHO cooled cameras. So those, they have like cooling and everything, because like when you're running these cameras for so long, even like the temperature might affect like hot pixels in the chip and things like that. So you're gonna get like noise, and that's the reason why some of these cameras they come with coolers and all this stuff. So this is a really popular camera right now. And there's a lot of people taking pictures with this, and apparently it's quite powerful. Okay, but these cameras have been specifically designed for astrophotography. Okay. So you can see, like, in terms of cameras, like the thing has evolved a lot compared to some of the other items that we're seeing that that an amateur astronomer has, like, or uses. Okay. Okay. One thing that you might not usually think of are observatories, right? Okay. So some people, they build like observatories in their own houses, like the Jonathan Faye's home observatory. Like he's a really known guy in the community. Yeah, he built his own dome, and basically, like, they usually take a shed or whatever, and then they build a dome on top, and that's the way they install the telescope there and the systems. Some of the people, they go for this type of other systems, which has a sliding roof, and that's pretty cool. It's like, well, you have your shed, and then you can slide the roof, but you can also, if you have the systems, you could do it remotely. Because like if some people, they would have like weather detectors and stuff like that, and they will like, okay, is it raining now? Is it safe to open the roof? Then I expose my equipment, and they usually work in a room like that. Like they will have the computers, the Ccd cameras, everything there, right? So some people actually work there, and some other people, they go for remote setups, even if it's within their own home. It's like they'll be taking pictures from the comfort of their dining room, you know, like. So some other people, they do things like this. I know I've never seen one of those, but it looks cool. So mobile observatories. And this is another thing that's becoming trendy these days. It's like people that are into these hobbies, some of them, they live in cities, or they live in places where they don't have access to really good skies. So there's telescope hosting services. So these are places where you can bring your own telescope, and you will install it there. You pay the rent for your telescope, and then they will give you access to internet and a number of things, right? They also have like installed sensors for like I said, like for weather, stuff like that. Okay, so this is actually called EI, and it's in Spain. I know a lot of people for some are using this one. I think it's one of the cheapest ones probably around the Europe area anyway. I know there's plenty of them in Texas and places like that in the middle of the desert. So some more pictures of this thing. So this is what it looks like on the inside. They will have like each one of those telescopes will belong to a different people, and yeah, you can actually, like, they have services because, you know, like something might go wrong with the mechanics of your telescope or whatever. So they have people on site who can help you, like realigning the telescope or doing things like that. Okay. So I wanted to show you a little bit what, like, the remote interfaces. Maybe you can find this in Shodan or whatever. But I mean, like, there's pretty much like a lot of different programs to control the telescope. So I think what most people do is that they have like a terminal server or a team viewer or whatever, and then from there they launch all the programs they need to control the telescope, to take the pictures, and to control everything, right? Here's another picture. Like, for some reason, like, this guy is pointing to the mount of his telescope. I don't know if he's trying to see if something is wrong or whatever. But yeah, like, here's at the controls for the mount itself. Like, so that's what he would use to point to a particular object in the sky. Then he will have cables running to the Ccd cameras as well that will be connected to this computer. And yeah, basically you can do everything from remotely just by connecting into it. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about some hacks, because in the end of the day, I know you guys like hacking. Sorry. So one of the things that people were doing back then, I mean, this will probably be, I mean, people are still doing this, but maybe they started to do it like, I don't know, like 15 or 20 years back. And it's like they would take a webcam and they would modify it, repurpose it for astronomy, right? So it's not like rocket science anyway. Like, you'll take like a regular camera, basically you'll take it apart, and you'll extract all the components, blah blah. In some place you're gonna find the sensor. Sometimes you need to solder some of the cables because they have like LEDs or whatever. You don't want those lights and things like that. But there are some cameras that have been taken apart, and they apparently work better for this than others. And apparently what people is doing is they look for the better chips, and then obviously once they find one of those cameras that's cheaper than others, they would use that one basically. So then in this case they're using a plumbing PVC pipe, basically to build like kind of like the adapter to the eyepiece, and then they can connect that to the telescope, right? So that's how they will connect that with the PVC plumbing pipe. And yeah, basically it's like putting this in place of an eyepiece, and that way you take a picture. And like I said, it's not rocket science, but people get like really good results. Like, and they use that technique that I told you before, that they will record the video. And this is called like look imaging. So what they would do is they will take from that video, they will extract all the frames, and with software they will decide which one of the frames that are in that video has the best quality. And then they will use another software to stack those frames, which is to add the signal on the top from one on the top of another, and then you get like a really clear picture, right? Image stacking is one of the things that we're gonna cover in a bit. So yeah, this is a picture of Jupiter. Most of those web cameras, they are either using for planets or for the moon, the sun, things from our solar system. Okay, so planetary objects, they call them. So that's a picture of Jupiter, a really nice one actually. This is a picture of the moon. All of those were taken with that specific camera. Some more things. DSLR mods. So there's a problem with these regular DSLR cameras, and it's that most of them, they will have infrared filters. So I mean that's in place there because like when you're taking a picture, you don't really care about the infrared, right? So I mean you don't want to see like heat or whatever. So what manufacturers do is they just put an infrared cut filter, and they would block some wavelengths, in particular ultraviolet and infrared light. And they will only pass the visible light, and then that light gets into the chip and they process it, okay? But the issue is that infrared light, in particular, it's something that it's very interesting for astrophotography because that particular wavelength contains the hydrogen nebulae, which is called hydrogen alpha, and it usually will get like blocked by those filters. So people thought, okay, let's take apart these cameras and try to get rid of that filter. So that filter usually is somewhere in like in between the CMOS chip and well, the materials that are on the top, like so it's mounted somewhere there. These are pictures from one of the, I think it's from a Canon camera, that show actually how to remove the filter. So the filter looks like something like that, and then, but it's just a matter of pretty much removing it, okay? So again, it's not rocket science, although like, if you look at the websites, like some of the cameras, they are actually quite complex to disassemble. Some people, they sell actually kits already there, I mean off the shelf with the filters out. So this is I think I found this one on Alibaba or something like that, I don't remember. But yeah, basically they were like, okay, we're gonna give you this camera that already has it's been astro modded, that's what they call it, okay? And you know, like it can actually have either the filter completely out, or they can replace that filter with another filter for you, because there are some filters that might be interesting, okay? So there's this website actually where you can buy the different combinations from cameras and filters and everything. This is a German website. So yeah, they sell like pretty much every model of camera. I think they mostly do this with Canon cameras, although like I mean at least the ones that are for sale. But if you have a Nikon camera, for instance, like you can do it yourself if you want. But most of the ones that they sell online, they're usually Canon cameras, which apparently for astrophotography they used to be slightly better. Okay, and I want to show you like the difference between like a picture taken with the filter and without the filter. Okay, so this is a Canon 5500 modded from Stuart GP from Cloudy Nights, which is a forum on the internet about astrophotography, and this I mean, we're gonna see the exact same picture with the same telescope and setup, but this is before he mounted the camera, and this is after he mounted the camera. So you can tell there's a huge difference. But basically, all this infrared signal is pretty much missing on the other picture, right? So, well, this guy was saying like there was no way I would have my camera unmodded, okay? But anyway, like some people they still want to use their DSLRs for because if you do one of these mods, it's just going to be for astrophotography. You cannot use the camera for anything else. So some people they buy like €2,000 cameras and then they go like, now I'm only gonna use it for astrophotography, you know. So some people do it, but some other people they don't. Okay, so some more stuff that people is doing out there are firmware hacks. Okay, so for some models, there's actually like two different communities, let's say, out there. One of them developed like a firmware mod for Canon cameras, and then some other guy on the internet is maintaining a forum that's called Nikon firmware. No, sorry, Nikon hack. And then some people, I mean, like some of the features that, in the case of the Nikon hacker, is like some of the features that they built in, I mean, or they pretty much like they took the firmware, the real firmware of Nikon, and then they modified some bits, let's say, okay? I mean, so what they're doing is really disabling or enabling features that are built into the firmware. That's the case of the Nikon camera. But in the case of the Magic Lantern, it's actually a fully firmware developed from scratch. That's what I think of it. Okay? So, well, so some people like build like features that allow to do astrophotography related things. Okay? So in the case of the Magic Lantern, they will have like, well, they built a few features on top. One of them is like a camera alignment for to do like polar alignment, for instance. So they have a tool there that helps you with that. The camera alignment is just to align the actual camera with the axis of your scope. Then they have the polar alignment tool. They have another tool to focus your camera, which is something that, I mean, when you're taking pictures of the sky, you need to focus the camera to the objects. I mean, sometimes it's not straightforward. So they have a tool for that. And then, well, they have like a kind of like a scheme that switches from dark to red, which when you're like operating a camera and in darkness, it's supposed to be better for your eyesight because you won't get blind, right? Then the guys from Nikon Hacker, they only did like a mod. Basically, when you take a picture with, at least with Nikon cameras, even if you select like, you know, like when you're taking a picture with RAW, I mean, in RAW mode, it's basically, you're supposed to get whatever the camera got from the chip, right? But it turns out that Nikon does some black magic behind the scenes. And then they clip some bits, they basically do some post-processing on the data that the camera has taken. And that affects, well, you're not really getting raw pictures. So these guys, they built a mode that disables those post-processing features built on the Nikon firmware, right? So, and then there was another problem with Nikon cameras, that some of them, and this is basically due to the same thing, when you're taking a picture of the sky, some stars will magically disappear. And that's because they think, oh, there's only like this little amount of light here. This has to be wrong. And then they clip the, well, they basically do this kind of like black magic, and they try to detect defects that they think they might be coming from the chip or whatever, but they're really taking part of your signal out, right? So that's why some people like they put together this thing. I'm gonna show you the interfaces. So for instance, on the Canon camera, well, this is the Magic Lantern firmware, which I think is not it's not only used for astrophotography. These guys implemented an astrophotography module, but some other people are using it to enable other features and stuff. Okay. So yeah, they have the Astro mode there, and you can enable it, blah blah. And then if you enable it, you have like on the display of your camera, you have these tools. like the azimuth polar alignment, which might help you with that. This is the autofocusing. So you select the star, whatever, and then the camera itself will get where's the actual focusing point, right? Because otherwise you have to do it manually, and it's like you usually go like, okay, it looks like it's getting bigger, now I think it's on the point, but you're obviously doing manually. So this thing should be probably more accurate. I mean, like some people, they actually have focuses like controlled by a computer, so they know that they're getting the right focus. But that's something that if you're doing, you need a computer attached to your telescope. It overcomplicates things. When you keep adding stuff, like things get more and more complex, right? And this is the firmware I have for Nikon, which is basically enable, disable this thing. And then if you enable it, you'll get like the real raw picture of the camera, okay? This is another hack. Well, it's not really a hack. It's an actual product that they're selling. Like this company called Arizona. They came up with this idea and they implemented it. And I think it's actually kind of like, I mean, it's very well thought out, you know? So basically they created this product called Hyperstar. And what they do is they replace the secondary mirror. I mean, if you remember the telescopes that we were looking at before, there were 3 types of telescopes: the refractor, and the compound, or the catadioptric. So the catadioptric has a secondary mirror, and for disassembly purposes, like you might have to clean the secondary mirror, right, which is on the front of the scope. I'm actually going to show you the picture here, which is going to be easier. So here's the secondary mirror of the scope, and then if you have to take it out, because you have to clean it or whatever, or if you have to replace it, you can take it out in the front. So these guys thought, okay, what would happen if we put a camera straight there, and if we create a lens that will correct for, I mean, like the optics, because it has to have like the right optics to be able to focus on everything. So basically what they're doing is they modify the scope, right? And they get rid of the secondary mirror and they put their own camera here. What happens if you do that is that the focal length of the scope is going to be reduced. And these telescopes were designed to have like long focal lengths, which is like you get like more magnification. But if you operate like some people, like when you start like doing astrophotography, like usually people go for shorter length telescopes because they're easier to handle, and it's easier to get like better pictures, and they're faster. Because like if you get like this amount of light, let's say into your telescope, from let's say let's an object like this big when you're taking a picture of it, right? If you get the object smaller, it means like the light is going to be more concentrated, right? So the bigger the picture is, the less the light you have on your object for the picture, and you're going to have to take longer exposure or more exposure of that object, or longer hours of integration time to achieve like an actual picture of the object. So people usually go for less magnification, and that means that the telescope is going to be faster when taking the picture, okay? Because it has less light on less space. Okay, so when these guys created this, what they're doing effectively is they're reducing the focal length of the scope. So instead of being like the ratio would be, instead of being like 10, it gets reduced to 2 or something like that. This is on the previous slide. So that means that the telescope is going to be up to 28 times faster than the usual focal ratio of 10. So it's a hack that transforms the SCT scope into really fast scope. So I'm going to show you a picture. So this is a hack to basically achieve like a cheaper astrograph, which you remember the other telescope that I showed you at the end of like that one that was specifically built for astrophotography. So what you're kind of doing with this is building a telescope specifically with the parameters that you need for astrophotography, okay? So well, this is the hack, like they replaced that. This is the actual, this is how that device looks. And yeah, it's funny because like it goes in the front. And you even have to run cables out of here. Those cables, even though it might look like they're gonna affect your picture, they don't really affect your picture. And even like some people, they put DSLR cameras here in the front. I mean, you're gonna get less light, but you can still take the picture. These cables, they might produce diffraction lines, which are the spikes that you see on some stars when they take pictures. But like they're not gonna affect like the quality of the picture overall. But yeah, like that's the setup. And here they compare. Well, this would be like a picture that was taken in an hour with a refractor, and the same picture taken in 90 seconds with that other scope, with this hack. So this is why I told you, like people would usually start in astrophotography, they will go for this kind of scopes, like for an apochromatic refractor, 4 inches, which is like not that big. This would be like 14 inches. So that's why it's taking more light than the other one, and it's better. But this would have like usually longer focal length, but this is a way of reducing the focal length. And then that way you get more light, less focal length, like really, really not a lot of focal length, and yep, you can achieve like this kind of results. Also, if you look at the parameters of the pictures here, they say in this case the guy took 12 pictures of 5 minutes each, and this has to do with the image stacking technique that we're gonna cover later. And in this other case, the guy took 9 pictures of 10 seconds each. The other advantage of this thing is that if you're taking 10-second pictures, you don't really need to guide the scope, which is what we're gonna see now. So when you have like a telescope and you're operating at really long focal lengths, the magnification you're getting is huge, right? So there's this thing called the periodic error in your quadrial mount that basically it doesn't always go at the same rate, and that's inherent to the way that gears work, so it cannot be fixed. In any way, it cannot be fixed in a gear-based telescope. And then like there are some other things like when you have to align your scope, it has to be aligned perfectly to the north celestial pole, and if it's not aligned, then you're gonna have some movement within your vision field. So every time you take a picture, the image is going to be moved a little bit. To prevent from that, what people do is they use these guiders. We're gonna cover that now in a second. Sorry. Are we good with time and everything? It's like,
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure.
all okay. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So you might think, why imaging? Imaging is not just like, to me it's like, okay, you have the naked eye, then you have like visual observation with the telescope, and the next thing is imaging. And imaging enables you to see more. And I think it's actually a scientific tool, because it's not just, the angle is not necessarily to get like a really nice picture. It might just be able to capture a faint object and know if it's there, like, I don't know, like an asteroid. If you're trying to track an asteroid, maybe visually you won't be able to do it because it's a very faint asteroid. But if you take a picture for like 2 hours, you aggregate all that data, and then you stack it or whatever, maybe you'll be able to say, okay, it's actually there. So this is kind of like the thing that imaging enables you to do. It's not only about taking like pretty pictures, it's about being able to see more, okay? In my own experience, it's a completely different beast from visual observation. So I only got into it like a year and 2 years back, and it requires a lot of practice and patience, which I don't have sometimes. But yeah, like I mean, like it's a completely different world from visual observation. And yeah, like some people, aside from the scientific aspect to it, they only like to take like really nice pictures, and that's in first instance why they get into this. But there's also an artistic component to it. Like people try to try like really nice compositions of this object or this other object passing by, whatever, at the right time because it has to be tonight, whatever. Or they use the colors in a different way because you can use like different color palettes and stuff like that. Okay, so some people are into that kind of thing. For me, it's more like sort of like the scientific tool that I like, but there's a little bit for everyone anyway, like in there. So anyway, when we're talking about guiding, I already pretty much explained it to you, so I'm gonna be quick with this. So what I was telling you, depending on the focal length, blah blah, and the characteristics of your scope, you're gonna need to guide. And guiding really helps you with your equatorial mount periodic silver, which I already told you, and polar misalignment. Okay. So how do you guide? So basically, you need another scope. So here's where things start to get more complex, you know, because you don't only need your regular optical assembly tube. This is what you're gonna take the picture with. You need another scope, and you need another camera, and well, you're gonna need some software of some sort to track that. Okay. So yeah, in this case, like, there's another way of doing it. Well, and you might think, like, how did they do it back in the day when they had no like cameras or whatever? So they did it manually. They did it with this. This is an eyepiece that will go into the other scope, and then the guy, when he was taking the picture, he would like rectify with the manual controls by placing the star into this reticle, okay? And then he will have like X magnification, whatever, and then so basically, if he was taking like a 1 hour picture, he will have to sit there for an hour modifying using the controls to make sure that that star guide that he was using was always like on the crosshair of his eyepiece. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how things have been changing lately. Okay, another way of guiding that might be sometimes is better is to use an off-axis guide. So internally, that device, what it has is that it reflects a little bit of the light beam onto one of the sides, and that way you're sure that you're using the same light beam for guiding than for imaging. Okay, because with the other setup you have two scopes that are supposedly aligned, and you need another scope on the top of your scope, and that might mean that your mount has to handle more weight as well, and that might mean that you have to have some more counterweights, or maybe you're already at the limit because then you have your camera, blah blah blah. So there's a little bit of a problem with everything. Everything you do might help with something, but on the other hand, it might not help you with other stuff. In this case, you're losing light, basically, because you're deviating part of the light beam to use the other guiding camera. But yeah, you don't have to have another scope on top of your scope. Yep. Okay, so some people are using Raspberry Pi based systems for guiding, whatever. So they build, in this case, the Raspberry Pi is connected to the camera. They have like a touch screen, whatever, and they controlling the guiding through the camera. The most popular thing these days is this thing, which is called PhD Tube, and it's a software for guiding. Basically, you select the guide star, and this is the statistics of how the software is performing, basically, like modifying the trajectory of the scope and making sure that the star is always on the crosshair, pretty much. So this is done by software. Then there are standalone devices that do it by themselves. This is handy because, like, if you're doing guiding, maybe you don't want to bring your laptop to the field, you know? Because, like, if you start like doing it like this with software, then that means that you're not only going to need like that, you're gonna need like maybe a power supply for your laptop, blah blah. It starts overcomplicating things as well. Okay, so this is where it gets like, I think this is one of the this has been done for ages, but this hasn't been done in the amateur world for ages. I mean, they are probably for 20 years or whatever. But right now the software has evolved, and the techniques and the algorithms to do this have evolved a lot. And you have software out there that you can use to perform this thing, which is image stacking, which is the real advantage. So it's a method to overlay like multiple pictures, like what I told you before. So like if you have like 50 pictures, you can integrate them together. So the benefits of it. When I started looking into this, I thought, okay, you're getting more light. So that's what you're doing, like you're aggregating the light. But that's not really the thing. What you're doing is really increasing the signal to noise ratio, which means you're reducing the noise in your pictures. because you're making sure that the pixel that your camera has taken is actually there. It's not a defect, because you're computing the average of 90 pictures, so 100 pictures, right? And then basically you're making sure that there was a signal there, a real signal, okay? That's what you do when you aggregate all that data. It also increases the dynamic range, which is a thing that has to do with the tones and the range of those tones in a picture. Doesn't matter. And it also enables you to combine data from multiple sessions. Before, like 30 years back, the guy had to be there taking a picture for a maximum of 12 hours. It was like, there's gonna be daylight. But using this technique, you can aggregate data for months. So you can use this to combine even like old data with new data and stuff like that. Or even like people, like, and this is really common these days. For instance, if you're taking a picture of a galaxy, you're gonna use a technique to image the core of the galaxy, some other technique to image the other stars, whatever, and then you combine all that data together using different techniques. And then you get the final picture, which highlights all the different details, okay? So well, there's a number of softwares that do this thing. I use PixInsight, but there's the thing. So this is what I was trying to tell you, which is about reducing the noise. You can see this is a single frame, for instance, in a picture, and this is 30 frames stacked. You can see there's way less noise in the last picture than just in a single frame, okay? And this is one of the softwares that's used these days for stacking. It's not the most popular one. Most of the softwares that, I think there's a few of them that are free, but most of the others you have to pay for them. I mean, they're proprietary. Yeah, I think we're not, I think it's only like 10 slides left, or 20. So, image stacking, aside from stacking, you have to calibrate the frames, sorry. So, usually when you're taking a picture, you have to take these 4 types of pictures. One of them is the light frames, which is the visual ones. The other ones are flat frames. With these frames are taken with your optical assembly. I mean, the same way as it is, but covering, for instance, like, I'll sum it up. These frames will get rid of the defects in your optical assembly, okay? So they try to, you take these frames to remove the signal from the light frames. So all these frames are actually taken to get the signal out from the light frame. The dark frame is a frame that you produce at the end of the night, at the end of the session, by taking a picture with the same settings that you were using for the light frames. And it's going to take out the signal that's on the camera that's related to the heating and the sensor, like the defects on the sensor. The bias frame is the same thing, but you do that at the maximum speed that your camera allows, and that will get rid of the inherent signal that's on the chip, okay? So, summing up, you use all those calibration frames with your light frames, and, well, this is the way to take flat frames, by covering your telescope with a sheet, and then you take a picture, and then, you have to point your telescope to the blue sky, whatever, on daylight, and then you can remove that signal. And obviously, the same way that you stack in your light frames, you also stack those other frames. Like when you're taking, if you're taking this picture, you don't take one picture, you take 100 pictures. And you aggregate the signal, and then you compute your master bias, okay, your master flat in this case. So this is more or less like the algorithm that you have to follow. It overcomplicates things, but so you take your bias offset, blah blah, you subtract that data, blah blah. Your lights come in here, and then basically with your calibration frames and your stacked lights, you create the final picture. This is a picture that I took, a single frame from M57. That's a stretch, so it shows like all the data in there, for instance. And these are a picture that I took from Barcelona. I think it was like maybe 50 frames stacked. So just so you see the difference, okay? Then this is about calibration and using calibration or not using calibration frames. This is a picture that I took from Barcelona as well, of M42, and I'm not using calibration frames. And you can see all the defects here, right? There's defects here on the borders. You can see like straight lines there. There's a lot of noise in there. And this is the same picture using calibration frames. So, I mean, you have to use everything that's at your hand, pretty much. Anyway, pretty quickly, narrowband imaging, which is what I was telling you before, using those filters to only take the hydrogen to light, hydrogen beta, oxygen, sulfur, whatever. You can basically take single pictures that would only take the signal of that particular element, right? And then you use a palette, of course. This is actually the Hubble palette. And Hubble operates this way. It doesn't really operate only on visible light. It operates using this type of filters as well, right? And this is a picture taken from London of the Rosetta Nebula using that technique. Okay? So even from the city you can take like astonishing pictures like it's by this guy at the London Astronomy. This is another picture taken from Paris of another nebula. So I mean, like, even from these places you could do something like this. The last thing, public data pools. One thing that you can do is, like, for instance, like the Hubble legacy archive is available for everyone to download from the internet. So you can download data from there and process it yourself if you want, using these programs to stack images and stuff. So this is a composition that someone made with the data from the Hubble telescope. So the last thing, because we're running out of time, conclusions. So I think amateur astronomy could be like a fun hobby for those of you into technology and science, because like it's a mix of those two things. And the excuses like I live in London are no longer excuses. And I think the price of all this gear has dramatically come down. 30 years back, doing astronomy and doing photography was probably like quite expensive hobby. But these days you can get into it like at a slow pace, because like it's still like expensive if you go to the high-end equipment. But with this sort of hacks and using stock Dslr camera from like 10 years back or whatever, you modified whatever, and you could do stuff, right? So you don't really need to go on the expensive side. And the improved imaging processing techniques make a huge difference from years back. So the results you're gonna get today, even with cheap equipment, are gonna be like they will blow someone's mind away from years back. Okay. And well, amateur astronomers keep coming with new hacks, and so can you. So that's everything. Any questions?
Spend on equipment in 20 years?
I haven't spent much, but yeah, my telescope, well, I have like one with a quadrilateral mount and an SCP, like one of the ones that we were seeing in one of the slides. So the telescope itself, I think, is like maybe 1,600 euros or something. And then the mount, which is an equatorial mount with motors and stuff, because you need that if you're gonna do imaging, I think it's like 1,200. And then the camera that I'm using right now is like the camera that I had before. So a regular DSLR. So yeah, I don't know. But I think if I had to buy my telescope again, because the telescope that I bought, when I bought it, I was like, I'm gonna be doing visual observation, and because it was like an upgrade from my old telescope, right? So I was like, I'm gonna be doing visual observation and imaging. But I'm finding myself that I'm not doing more visual observation these days, so I'm probably going for something different. So yeah, you can probably get the same better equipment for imaging for maybe for about like, I don't know, like something like 1,500 to 2,000 euros, something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you do any comparison of overlapped images from two different points? So maybe that you might get some background noise at one point of the Earth, and you can cancel them out and get a better picture. Is there any things you do like that?
What do you mean exactly? So
say you had one camera in Spain,
yeah,
and one camera in London, and you go take a picture of this object.
Yeah.
Can you do something clever with the software to cancel it out? Or?
Some of the observatories, I think they work in that way. Like they will aggregate the signal from different observatories from around the world, right? I mean, like if you do it as a regular astronomer, I don't know if there's going to be any advantage. I mean, theoretically, if you're imaging the same, I mean, objects that are very far away, you should get the exact same thing. I mean, there's gonna be difference between those two pictures because of the equipment. There's like your equipment might be different from the other guys. But I think some of the observatories actually work that way. Like they would basically take pictures and
I've got Raspberry Pi, you've got Raspberry Pi.
you can take the picture from London and I take it from Spain, like. Yeah.
Can you put the telescope on a large drone?
You could, but I don't know if there's gonna be any advantage to it. I mean, like maybe if you go above the clouds or something, which might be helpful for London. But yeah, you need that thing. I mean, when you're taking pictures, it has to be really stable. Actually, like even the minor vibration, like it will ruin your picture. And you have to take in account that you're taking long exposure pictures, so you have to be like 10 minutes or whatever, or 5 minutes or whatever. Really, if even sometimes the wind, like it affects your picture, and you have to just throw them away.
How much data storage have you got at the moment for your hobby?
So one thing that I was doing right now is that it's like some people they will keep like all the originals, and I think it's a good thing to do. I'm just putting them on Blu-rays and I'm like throwing them away. But yeah, like I haven't really taken a lot of data. It's like I'm only like 1.5 years into the hobby, and I've been mostly like trying to find the right point. So most of the data that I was taking, it wasn't probably the good data to work with, but it was more to know whether I was on the right track or I was kind of like experimenting, you know. But I guess like the people who are really into this stuff, they would have like loads of storage because they like to keep the originals. And actually what happens is like a lot of people, they go back into the archives because when you're starting this hobby, you don't really master the techniques of image processing, right? So what happens is like people after 10 years, they go back to the archives and they look at the data they took like 10 years back, and you can see the pictures. Like some guys, they post in the forums like, this was my first image processed with the same data, and this is me processing this data 10 years back, and it's like completely different. So
Are there cases where it's too light for you to perform visual observation and you can only do imaging?
So yeah, that's the case actually with the cities like.
So in London, you're not
yeah,
going to get.
like for instance, like in Barcelona, visual observation, like it bores me to death. It's like